People say art can be anything and life is art. But I doubt that everyone who says these things have enough understanding of art. If you think you do, I hope that my perspective will aid your learning. If you don't, I hope today's lesson will do you good. My calculus teacher keeps saying this one thing. Don't ever use a terminology that you don't understand. I find this very true, and I will always remember this quote throughout my life. It applies to many things, especially in very conceptual subjects such as scientific research, engineering, just to name a few. You have to know exactly what the heck you're doing at all times in order to make real progress. However, this may or may not apply to art. You would probably say to me, "Hey Jimmy, since you're giving us an art class today, and you said that we need to understand everything we say, why don't you define the word art?" I would respond with, "That is a very good question, and I do not have a definite answer." To answer this question, however, I think it's a good time for me to tell a little story. A long time ago, this question was the least of my concerns. Back then, I was very keen in fan art, specifically Splatoon fan art. If you recall my previous video about music theory, I talked about how one of the music pieces absolutely made me fall in love with that franchise. It marked the beginning of my artistic journey as I drew on my phone, on my iPad, bringing fictional characters to life. It was a great time of exploration as I discovered new ways of illustrating, experimented with different brushes, and pondered the endless possibilities of digital illustration. In addition, my passion with Splatoon was fueled by this burst of innovation, and its impact has completely changed my sense of aesthetics and my view of life. It was because of this wonderful meetup in Splatoon that I decided to go further in the field of visual art. The question of what art is encounters anyone serious about art when they start. I was stunned by this question. This may be an overstatement, but I was indeed very concerned with this question. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I was afraid of the possibility that what I have been doing does not count as art at all. That is, fan art is not art. Or is it? Actually, I wasn't asked this question by anyone. I had to figure it out myself. When I looked at the works of prominent artists on the internet and what we are doing in art class, I sensed that there was something off about my fan art. It took me about a month to figure out that fan art is merely copying someone else's work, which may or may not contain a lot of artistic value because it is technically not your work. That's why we don't want too much fan art in your art school portfolio, because you can only say that much with unoriginal content. I was concerned about this issue, worrying if what I've been doing is actually all worthless. But then, when I picked up the courage to ask an established artist this question, they answered, "That is a very good question, and I don't have a definite answer." I realized one thing that is very important. The universal definition of art does not exist. And every artist has their own interpretation. And that interpretation can even change throughout time. We are back at the statement of art can be anything. Well, yeah, art can indeed be anything, as long as you know what you're doing and what message you're trying to convey. The one thing that art is not, though, is randomness. Art is not random. Every aspect of it must be well thought out by the artists themselves. So well thought out that every small detail on the artwork must be considered intended by the artist. You can look at a banana stuck on a wall with duct tape and say, "My pet squirrel can do that, and it doesn't belong in a museum because it's that easy." Well, the absurdity and simplicity is part of the artwork. We're not even considering the connotations of banana, duct tape, walls, etc., the context of the artwork, and the meanings behind the artwork's title, which can usually pack a huge load of information, even when it's only a few words. Also, the fact that no one else had stuck a banana on the wall with duct tape and claimed that art adds to the artistic value of this artwork. It is unprecedented. Take a look at this artwork. I'm gonna hide the title first. So, we see a pile of colorful candy on the floor. Considering that we have no idea what this artwork is about, I won't expect you to get anything from it yet. Now, I'll show you the title. The title is Untitled, Portrait of Ross in LA. What do we see now? Well, the artist claims that this pile of candy is a portrait of the person named Ross. So we can infer that in some way, this pile represents Ross. Now, the entire context of this artwork. This artwork was made by Felix Gonzalez Torres in 1991. The candies weigh 79 kilograms in total. The candies are actual candies that can be eaten. Some viewers of this artwork would take a candy from the pile and eat it, while the museum replenishes the candies every once in a while. The artwork is heavily tied with the purpose of its creation and its history. Felix Gonzalez Torres was gay, and his partner was called Ross. And unfortunately, Ross died of AIDS. In remembrance of Ross, Felix made this portrait of Ross, consisting of candies that viewers can take away with them. Given the context, the slow diminishing of this pile represents Ross's demise. And now, we look at this artwork differently. Suddenly, this artwork becomes emotional, intimate, and even somewhat political. It becomes an artwork that touches on the topics of romance, sexuality, and death. It is interesting to see how a simple pile of candies can achieve so much depth and evoke such emotions in people's hearts that it deserves its own spot in the museum. There are still debatable questions about this artwork. Why candies were chosen instead of something else? What it means for the museum to replenish the candies? What it means for the audience to eat the candies, etc. This is an example of a very well-made conceptual artwork. It is unique in its way of communicating messages. It evokes emotion and raises questions in the viewers, and it is definitely more than meets the eye. Another example of conceptual artwork, a movement rather, is suprematism. Not supremacism, that's bad, it's suprematism. Suprematist artworks abandon the portrayal of objects and instead focus on the simple geometric shapes like circles and squares. It is extreme abstraction of art. It is a bit difficult to understand, but the aim of this movement is to free art from the burden of portraying objects. The most iconic artworks from this movement are Black Square, which is literally a black square painted on canvas, and White on White, which is a white square painted on a white canvas. This is towards the more extreme end of the conceptual art field, but it's art nonetheless because it has meaning and it is unprecedented. Although anyone could have drawn squares easily, suprematist artists are the first to give definite meanings to these squares. So, based on my learning and my experience, I decided to separate art into two categories. The first category is conceptual art, where the medium of art is unlimited and the most important aspect of artwork is its conceptual meanings. The other category of art is technical art, where artists strive to create the most stylistic or realistic images using traditional media like painting, sculptures, graphite, etc. This is a divide that I think people should realize. If anyone here wanted to do art in the future, you should think about this divide and how you want to react to this divide. Let's talk about the technical branch of art. We see them all the time, actually. I believe that this kind of art is closely tied with commerce, advertisement, and consumerism. What we see in books, in movies, in TV shows, and all of media are considered technical art. This is because the purpose of these artworks is looking good and appealing to the general public. For example, the entire genre of anime. Anime is great. The good ones are very well written and well made, which made them prominent elements in a lot of teenagers' lives nowadays. However, we rarely see what's going on in Japan at all. All we see are the products and not what is happening behind the scenes. In Japan, the anime industry is extremely commercialized. The competition of anime source material, manga, is incredibly fierce and stressful, as getting a serialization deal is extremely difficult. Not to mention the production of anime. Because anime is able to reach a wider range of audiences, which manga gets animated, is also a very tough competition. Illustrators, voice actors, and directors work their heads off to produce the legendary genre of animation known as anime. And behind the touching stories and stunning visuals is a rapidly aging population where young people are reluctant in raising children due to their occupations. Why am I talking about Japan's social issues? I digress. Anyways, profit is very important in most media production industries. Well, you can argue that media producers have intrinsic motivations for their productions, but after all, most of them work for corporates and are under supervision of the same people in order to ensure profit. Warner Bros., for example, butchered the movie Justice League in 2017 and disappointed fans across the world with an unbelievably bad movie. Although the movie was one of the best at its aesthetics and its filmography, the corporate interference of that movie completely ruined the theatrical release. When we saw the Snyder Cut in 2021, which was the original vision of what this movie was supposed to be, everyone saw the difference between the two, and apparently the Snyder Cut was on a whole other level. Although the 2017 release is a work of art, because its prime purpose was profit, its artistic value was destroyed by corporate intervention. Therefore, it was a bad artwork. This brings to another statement that people usually say. There are no bad artworks. Well, I'll be frank here and say, yes, there are bad artworks, and most people either try to show support for others or lie to themselves. In the technical branch of art, the communication of visual language and artistic expression in general is the top priority. When an artist fails to achieve that, they have accomplished nothing in particular. What matters here is either community contribution or personal gain. Well-established artists contribute to the community by producing pioneering artworks that others can learn from. Less skilled artists improve upon their own artwork, and although they are not the best artworks around, they have personal value. Therefore, the only way for technical artwork to have value is for it to be better than previous artwork produced. However, in the other branch of art, the concept arts, there are indeed no bad artworks, as long as the artist knows what they're doing. When we look at this divide in a historical perspective, we actually see that we have came a long way to modern art and my understanding of this divide. In the early days, naturalism and realism were very prominent, and art was meant to depict people and things, a lot of which are religious too. We see stuff like the Sistine Chapel, etc. And then in the late 19th century, artists in Europe started to shift their focus away from realism and focused more on the study of visual language at the purest. So, abstract art was born. The aforementioned suprematism is a branch of the abstract movement, and from what we've seen, suprematist artists certainly don't want to depict people and things. They like simple shapes. As we move closer to present time, the divide between conceptual art and technical art intensifies. We begin to see more ready-made artworks after Duchamp's Fountain in 1917. What I mean by ready-made is that the artworks are made of things that were already manufactured, in most cases not even designed by the artists themselves. In other words, found objects. Duchamp's Fountain is just a porcelain urinal placed sideways. He claimed the urinal to be a piece of art in order to mock the high art community for their fixation on traditional art. The fountain was seen as a landmark in modern art history because it questioned the definition of art at the time and completely changed how people viewed art. Leonardo da Vinci would have certainly not approved Marcel Duchamp's work as art. This is because the definition of art changes over time. I think y'all can understand this by now. In the present, the definition of art is very inclusive and open-ended, and the pioneer who made this advancement is Duchamp with his fountain. It's funny because if I put a toilet urinal in a museum today, it'll not achieve the same effects at all. It'll be considered vandalism and the urinal will be taken out as trash. Here's one of the most important takeaways from this lesson. The value of conceptual art is not judged by its objective value. It is judged by its relevance in society and the implications of its existence in our time. The incredibly inclusive modern art cannot be the ultimate form of art. And it is hard to argue that there even is an ultimate form of art. Who knows how things will go in the next decade? Art keeps evolving, just like technology. We may revisit the old movements and revitalize them, but each time we bear more knowledge of who and what came before us. So art will only get more complicated. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.